Greetings, class. Today I want to talk to you about Asa Griggs Candler. Candler, in my opinion, is a perfect example of an American entrepreneur and a success story from the Gilded Age. Candler was born in 1851 on a Georgia farm, and regardless of his circumstances at birth, all of that changed in the 1860s because during the Civil War, Candler's family farm was destroyed, along with his family's wealth. And so Candler was really a guy, regardless of what he was born into. As a teenager, Candler lived in poverty. He didn't have anything. In the 1870s, early 1870s, 1873, he moved to Atlanta. And if you know the history of Atlanta, it also was destroyed during the Civil War. And so both Candler and the city of Atlanta are two things trying to rise from the ashes of the Civil War. Candler had hoped of becoming a doctor, and he couldn't afford to become a doctor. He realized that that was not a possibility. And so he decided he wanted to work with pharmacists. He wanted to be a pharmacist. So he got a job at a pharmacy in Atlanta, and he only had a couple of bucks to his name when he got there. And so part of this job allowed him to live in the basement. So Candler lived in the basement of the pharmacy. He slept on a cot. And if the doorbell rang in the middle of the night, he had to run upstairs and see whatever the customer needed because it could possibly be an emergency. They had to mix together a drug or something like that. And so Candler starts out as this clerk living in the bottom of a basement. Eventually, through hard work and smart investing and things like that, Candler was able to work himself up to partner. He actually became the partner of a drugstore. And eventually he was able to buy out his partner and become the sole owner. That in itself is a success story. A man who came to Atlanta with a few bucks and ends up becoming a business owner in Atlanta. But his story doesn't stop there. In 1888, Candler purchased the formula for Coca-Cola from its inventor, John Pemberton. In his presentation this week, Dr. Roberts said that inventing something is not necessarily enough to achieve success. A lot of people think, oh, if I could just invent something, then I would have it made. But that wasn't the case with Pemberton. Pemberton invented Coca-Cola, but Pemberton died broke. And in fact, Candler was able to buy the formula for Pemberton because Pemberton owed Candler money. And Candler forgave a debt of $550, which is how he purchased Coca-Cola for $550, at least Pemberton's share of it. When Pemberton died, he had only sold 25 gallons of Coca-Cola. So this formula that today we're so familiar with, and it's been modified a little bit, but Coca-Cola had only sold 25 gallons. Candler got it. He began marketing it. And one thing he did was he sold out a lot of free samples. He went to all these drugstores and he asked the druggists, hey, who's your best customers? And he found out who they were and he mailed them a ticket for a free glass of Coke. And then, counting on the entrepreneurship of others, he took 2 gallons of syrup to each pharmacy. He said, this syrup, this gallon will cover the free tickets I mailed out. But here's a second free gallon. And so what happened was now the pharmacist had an incentive, the drugstore had an incentive to sell this second gallon because he gave away 2 gallons, one to the customer that was going to get it for free with the ticket, but this second gallon for the drugstore to sell if anybody wanted some that didn't have a ticket. And so what happened was he created a demand for Coca-Cola. So we said Pemberton in his first year sold 25 gallons. All right, Candler, so that was in 1887. Candler in just a few years had sold a few thousand gallons. By 1891, so just a few years, all right, after he purchased the company in 88, in 1891, Candler sold just shy of 20,000 gallons. So from 25 gallons of Coca-Cola, 25 to 20,000 gallons in just a few years. By 1901, so that's a decade later, 1901, Candler sold 500,000 gallons of Coca-Cola syrup. So it wasn't the invention itself, it was the man behind it and how he marketed it. Pemberton died broke and sold Coca-Cola essentially as a way to pay off his debt to this pharmacist, Candler. Candler transformed it into the national brand that we know today. One last note on this, Weingeist in his article, Economic Role of Political Institutions, he explains that limited government or restricted government is necessary for economic growth. And just a few years after Candler's success in the early 1900s, what we would call the progressive era, Candler started to face a lot of trials and things like that because of the Food and Drug Administration and Harrison Narcotics Acts and things like that. Candler won those trials, but it makes you wonder, because the government had grown so much bigger by the progressive era, had the Food and Drug Administration and things like that existed, if that big government, that large federal government had existed in 1888, would Candler and Coca-Cola have achieved the success as we know it today? Would we know Coca-Cola as the brand we see everywhere worldwide? Thank you.